I always say 75, you're gold till 75.
When you think about the beginning, you're like, let me try this thing.
I never said I'm gonna try this. I said I'm going to do this. For me, there was nothing else. I couldn't do anything else. This is what I could do, and I loved it with all my heart. I was gonna do it.
There's no people like show people. They smile when they are low.
Bette Midler is now 79. How she lives is sad. Her name still echoes through the halls of Hollywood, but her life is far from the glitz and glamour that once defined her.
Star of stage and screen, ladies and gentlemen, the woman who taught gunpowder how to bang. Here she is, Bette Midler.
Once the fiery force behind unforgettable films and timeless ballads, the woman who used to command sold-out stages now spends her days reflecting on choices she cannot undo. In this video, we're getting into the quieter, more bittersweet chapter of her life and uncovering what's really behind her public smiles. Bette Midler's legendary beginnings.
Because I, of course, have my shrink, and she tells me there's nothing like a good cry.
If you weren't aware of just how revolutionary Bette was, here's a tidbit for you. Back in the year 1986, long after she had already made a name for herself, she did something that might have gotten anyone else fired. On a movie set crowded with impatient crew members, she made everyone wait. Not for 10 minutes or even 30. She held up the entire production for over 2 hours. But why? Well, simply because she didn't like the color of a wig.
I told my people, my hair and makeup people, that I wanted to look like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland. I wanted the hair to be this certain shape, this sort of heart-shaped.
Everybody was losing their mind. But in the middle of the chaos, she just smiled and said, "Trust me." At the time, it sounded insane. But the movie went on to make $71 million. That's how she operated. Either it was going to be her way, or it wasn't going to happen at all. But things weren't always this way. Bette's journey began far away from the stages and spotlights in Honolulu, Hawaii, on December 1st, 1945. Born into a small Jewish family in a mostly Asian neighborhood, her name was inspired by the actress Bette Davis. Her father, Fred, painted houses and worked at a Navy base, while her mother, Ruth, stitched clothes at home. Money was tight, and there weren't many people around who looked like her or shared her traditions. She often felt like a stranger in her own neighborhood. But what the island lacked in familiarity, it made up for with rhythm. And once she discovered music, it was like the noise in her head finally made sense. By first grade, she was already standing out, singing Silent Night with a voice that earned her a small award. It was her mother who saw something flicker in her early on, gently nudging her toward the magic of old Hollywood musicals. She began obsessively studying how stars held themselves, how they moved, and how they owned a room without even speaking. By the time she reached Radford High School, she was dominating. Loud, expressive, impossible to ignore, her classmates voted her both the most dramatic and most talkative. She graduated in 1963 as valedictorian, full of ambition and too restless to sit still for long. Eventually, she gave college a shot, enrolling in the University of Hawaii at Manoa to study drama. But something about it didn't feel right. After 3 semesters, she decided to leave. Around that time, she landed a minor part in a film called Hawaii. Her role wasn't credited, and she barely had lines, but the paycheck was just enough to buy her a one-way ticket to New York City. It was the year 1965 when things truly changed. The city was buzzing with actors clawing their way into roles, and she didn't wait around for someone to discover her. She jumped into anything she could get, whether it was a tiny off-Broadway production like Miss Nefertiti Regrets, or a reimagined version of Cinderella. Then, in 1966, a real opportunity came along. She joined the cast of Fiddler on the Roof. At first, she was tucked away in the chorus, but she kept climbing. By 1968, she had stepped into the role of Teasseattle. She stayed with the production until 1970, sharpening her instincts and learning how to hold a crowd with just a beat. After leaving Broadway behind, she found herself in one of the unlikeliest places, a gay bathhouse hidden beneath the Ansonia Hotel. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't even really meant for concerts. But down there, with Barry Manilow on piano and a crowd of men cheering her on, she found something electric. The performances were loud, the costumes outrageous, and the humor sharp. But more than that, it felt like a home, a place where she could be theatrical and vulnerable all at once. It was in that basement that she started calling herself the Divine Miss M, a character that would soon break free from the underground and introduce the world to a performer unlike any other. The emergence of a career.
Oh, you gotta wear a wig, 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 wig if you wanna be famous. You gotta wear a wig, 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 wig if you wanna be smart, because a wig will hide the worst of all your features.
When she released her debut album, The Divine Miss M, in December of 1972, she wasn't just entering the music scene. In fact, she was bending it around her. The songs blended vintage style with something entirely new. Barry Manilow helped shape the sound, but it was her presence that turned the album into a phenomenon. It shot to number 9 on the Billboard charts, went platinum in both the United States and Canada, and delivered 3 standout hits: Do You Want to Dance?, Friends, and Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, a track from the 1940s that she reinvented completely, giving it new life and a fresh place in pop culture. Critics couldn't look away. Rolling Stone's Robert Christgau didn't just praise her voice. He saw something deeper, something game-changing. Whether she was singing a heartbreaking ballad like Hello in There or a haunting take on Delta Dawn, she packed every note with feeling. The year was 1973 when she won the Grammy for Best New Artist. But by the time she actually received it, early the following year in 1974, she was no longer just a promising newcomer. She had already become a sensation, someone the industry could no longer ignore. Then came 1976, and with it, the Depression Tour. It captured everything she stood for: chaos, glamour, comedy, music, and a heavy dose of soul. It was wild and unapologetically strange, and it was simply unforgettable. The tour was later turned into a television special for home box office called The Bette Midler Show. And for anyone who had doubted her reach or charisma, this was a reminder. She could move between platforms effortlessly, and her audience would follow her anywhere. While music had already brought her fame, something else was on the horizon. Hollywood was preparing to make space for her, and it started with a role that would challenge everything she had done before. A brand new medium.
I said, I'm going to do this. For me, there was nothing else. I couldn't do anything else. This is what I could do, and I loved it with all my heart. I was going to do it.
The year was 1979, and a film inspired loosely by the life of Janis Joplin was being developed, though it could no longer use Joplin's name due to her family's refusal to license her story. So the narrative changed, and the character became Mary Rose Foster, a fictional rock singer whose rise to fame was tangled with heartbreak, addiction, and emotional chaos. That character found its soul through Bette Midler. When the film, titled The Rose, hit theaters, critics and audiences were stunned. She didn't just play the part, she completely transformed. Every note, every breakdown, every moment on stage within the film felt startlingly real. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress and a Golden Globe win.
Well, I am surprised. I am very surprised, and gee, it feels good.
The title track, The Rose, became a signature song, winning a Grammy and living on as one of her most celebrated ballads. By the time the mid-1980s rolled around, she had already proven herself a powerhouse in music and drama. But what no one expected was how naturally she would fit into comedy. In 1986, she took on two very different but equally hilarious film roles that would catapult her even further into the mainstream. The first was Down and Out in Beverly Hills, where she played a neurotic, over-the-top housewife whose perfectly chaotic life is flipped upside down by a stranger entering her home. The film became a surprising hit, earning over $62 million and becoming the first R-rated success under Disney's Touchstone Pictures label. That same year, she joined forces with Danny DeVito in Ruthless People, a kidnapping comedy where the victim flips the script and takes full control of the situation. The chemistry between them, mixed with her impeccable timing, made the film a runaway hit, grossing over $71 million. Just like that, she had conquered yet another genre. But she wasn't done shifting tones. In 1988, she traded laughter for tears with the deeply emotional drama Beaches. In it, she played C.C. Bloom, a fiercely ambitious singer whose decades-long friendship with another woman becomes the heart of the film. Critics were divided. Some thought the sentiment was a bit too heavy, but audiences responded with an emotional roar. The story's themes of friendship, love, and loss struck a nerve, and the soundtrack became just as iconic as the film. And then came the song that would come to define her for generations. Wind Beneath My Wings, originally written in the late 1970s, found new life in Midler's voice. Her rendition soared to the top of the Billboard charts and took home both Song of the Year and Record of the Year at the Grammy Awards in 1990. The Beaches soundtrack went triple platinum. To this day, that song is played in weddings, funerals, and quiet personal moments. But just 1 year before Beaches, in 1987, she had already reminded the world why she remained unstoppable. Outrageous Fortune, a buddy comedy that paired her with Shelley Long, followed two women who discover they are dating the same man, only to join forces and track him down. It was absurd, full of unexpected twists, and wildly entertaining. The film grossed nearly $66 million globally, a massive win for a female-led comedy in that era. But perhaps what makes that performance even more remarkable is what was happening behind the scenes. She was pregnant while filming, 3 months along when they began, and 6 months by the time it ended. Rather than slow down, she pushed harder, performing her own stunts and concealing her pregnancy with oversized costumes, including a bright orange jumper that became oddly iconic. One of her best moments in the film, a messy fall in front of a truck, was entirely unscripted and so hilarious it made it into the final cut. Her performance in that quirky comedy turned heads and won her the American Comedy Award for Funniest Actress in a Motion Picture. And that was only the beginning. The Golden Globe nomination that followed confirmed what everyone had started to suspect. This wasn't just a funny woman with perfect timing. She was a true force in the world of screen comedy. However, behind the scenes, something even more significant was happening. That film also solidified a growing relationship with Touchstone Pictures. This time, she was paired with Lily Tomlin for a film that pushed every boundary of logic and leaned fully into its ridiculous charm. The story followed two pairs of identical twins, mistakenly switched at birth. One pair grew up in the polished comfort of New York City, the other in a quiet, rural town. And Midler played both versions of Sadie, creating two entirely separate personalities that existed in the same film and somehow never felt like the same person twice. Though critics didn't quite know what to make of the film, audiences found something undeniably entertaining in watching her and Tomlin bounce off each other in scenes that were equal parts chaos and charm. Both actresses earned nominations from the American Comedy Awards, and once again, Midler walked away with the win. Financially, the film brought in $40 million. A decent return, even if not quite the box office gold of her previous outing. What most people didn't know was how difficult it had been to shoot. The original plan to use body doubles for the twin scenes failed miserably during early test footage, forcing the team to get more creative. Through a mix of clever camera work and tightly choreographed timing, Midler and Tomlin ended up acting opposite themselves, an exhausting process, but one that paid off in the final cut. Time passed, and that film slowly earned a place in people's hearts. It never became a blockbuster, but over the years, it found a devoted following. Fans began to appreciate the sheer absurdity of the concept and Midler's ability to breathe life into two completely different characters living in the same body. Then, in the year 1993, she made a leap into something darker, stranger, and somehow even more iconic. Becoming Winifred Sanderson and more.
This, of course, is the great Winifred Sanderson of the Sanderson sisters, the first Hocus Pocus movie, costumed by Mary Voigt. And the palette she chose was blues and greens and purple.
The film was called Hocus Pocus, a Halloween fantasy comedy about three witches who returned to Salem centuries after their execution, ready to cause chaos on a single night of magic and mischief. With Sarah Jessica Parker and Kathy Najimy by her side, Midler transformed into Winifred Sanderson, the sharp-tongued, power-hungry leader of the trio. She was loud, theatrical, and full of devilish charm. But it was her musical number at the town's Halloween party that truly sealed her place in movie history. As she sang, "I Put a Spell on You," casting a hypnotic hold over the unsuspecting crowd, it became clear that no one else could have delivered that moment quite like her. When the film first hit theaters, it didn't land with critics. Reviews were mixed, and the box office earnings, while not terrible, weren't earth-shattering either. It made $48 million against a $28 million budget. But something strange happened after that. Year after year, the film found new life on television reruns, home video sales, and eventually merchandise. Hocus Pocus became a Halloween staple, and Midler's role as Winifred Sanderson turned into one of her most cherished performances, not just for fans, but for her as well. 3 years later, she returned in a film that carried a very different kind of power. It was 1996, and she joined Goldie Hawn and Diane Keaton for The First Wives Club, a story about three women who had been tossed aside by their wealthy, unfaithful husbands. But instead of falling apart, they teamed up, turning heartbreak into strategy and using their experience as their greatest weapon. Midler played Brenda, a sarcastic single mother who had built a business with her husband, only to be replaced by someone younger. Her delivery was sharp, her presence undeniable, and her lines, many of them laced with acid wit, became instant crowd pleasers. What made the film even more powerful was the real bond between its stars. Midler, Hawn, and Keaton shared more than just screen time. Their chemistry came from real-life friendship, and that warmth radiated through the movie, making their triumphs feel earned and deeply satisfying. The First Wives Club opened at #1 at the box office and went on to earn $181 million worldwide. On a modest budget, it became a cultural phenomenon and sent a strong message to Hollywood. Female-led comedies could lead the charge and shatter expectations. One moment in the film captured the spirit of the entire project. The three women standing side by side, singing "You Don't Own Me" by Leslie Gore. What had once been a pop song became an anthem of power and independence. Then, after spending decades away from the bright lights of Broadway, she didn't just ease her way back. She dove straight into something exceptionally bold and unexpected. The Great Return.
Did it feel like old times?
I've popped in those teeth over the years many, many times.
It was the year 2013 when she returned with I'll Eat You Last, a chat with Sue Mengers, a one-woman show that placed her center stage alone for 85 uninterrupted minutes. There was no ensemble, no costume changes, no grand set pieces, just her voice, her presence, and a character that could both charm and intimidate. She stepped into the shoes of Sue Mengers, a larger-than-life Hollywood agent known for her razor-sharp wit and unapologetic attitude. The role demanded total command over the room, and she delivered, balancing biting humor with a quiet vulnerability that made the audience lean in closer with every word. Within just 8 weeks, the production had paid back its entire investment, and the show became a roaring success. And then, just 4 years later, she tackled something even bigger, something nearly sacred to the world of musical theater. In 2017, she returned once more to Broadway to play Dolly Gallagher-Levi in the revival of Hello, Dolly, a role that had been performed by legends but somehow felt brand new in her hands. As soon as the show opened, it was mayhem. Tickets disappeared instantly, and the box office shattered record after record. Her performance was magnetic, and critics poured out praise in review after review. That same year, she finally won her first competitive Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical. The fact that she was 71 at the time made it all the more powerful, as if time had only sharpened her skill instead of dulling it. The role was physically demanding and emotionally layered, yet she made it seem effortless. She stayed with the show until early 2018, but when the final weeks of its run approached, she came back once more, closing it out with the same energy and grace she had brought from the beginning. Later, she would call it one of the most rewarding chapters of her life. Her relationship with Broadway has always been marked by a kind of electric energy. Whether in comedy or in music, she knows how to hold a crowd. But offstage, her life took its own surprising turns. Bette's personal life.
I've been married 21 years.
21 years.
Yes.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Happy birthday. Oh, get the round of applause.
I think I've made it 4, so I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, that's incredible. 21.
On December 16, 1984, she married Martin von Hazelberg. And in a town where marriages often don't make it past the first rough patch, theirs endured. It was not the kind of love story people write scripts about. There were no grand proposals or meticulously planned weddings. Instead, it began with spontaneity and a little bit of madness. They had first met in 1981 at a concert in Los Angeles, though nothing came of it. 2 years later, fate placed them in the same club again, but von Hazelberg took his time. An entire year passed before he finally called her. But once they started dating, everything moved like lightning. Just 6 weeks later, they ran off to Las Vegas, got married at 2 o'clock in the morning in a $45 ceremony, officiated by an Elvis impersonator inside the Starlight Chapel. There were no wedding photos, at least not until decades later, when the chapel unexpectedly found and shared the old negatives. Their beginning may have been impulsive, but what followed was grounded and real. They learned how to coexist, how to give each other space, and how to laugh through the hard parts. Midler often jokes that sleeping in separate bedrooms is one of the secrets to their long marriage, mostly because von Hasselberg snores. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. In those early years, they fought often. She was bold, outspoken, impossible to ignore. He was quieter, more restrained. The friction was constant. But when their daughter Sophie was born in 1986, everything changed. Priorities shifted, and family became the focus. Von Hasselberg even walked away from a successful career in commodities trading to stay home, helping raise Sophie and support Midler's demanding schedule. But he was never just in the background. Before devoting himself to family life, he had been a performance artist, one half of the Kipper Kids, known for their wild and abstract work. And at home, he remained deeply involved, teaching Sophie how to cook, helping her learn new languages, and filling their home with curiosity and care. Their marriage survived because they worked at it. They learned to compromise, to listen, and to let go of the small battles that once consumed them. Midler has admitted that learning to listen was not easy for her, but it became essential. Then, once again, she did what so few managed to do. She returned to television and redefined what it meant to play power on screen. What is Bette up to? In The Politician, a Netflix series centered around ambition, betrayal, and ruthless political maneuvering, she appeared in the second season as Hadassah Gold, a ferociously intelligent political operative who could dismantle an opponent with a sentence. Paired with Judith Light, the two created a duo that was sharp, calculated, and unforgettable. Then came The Glorias, a biographical film that came out in 2020 and centered on Gloria Steinem's life. Bette Midler was given a role that demanded not just performance, but presence. The show was known for its clever dialogue and biting humor, but Bette brought something more, a presence that refused to be background noise. The film followed Steinem's journey through the decades with different actresses, Julianne Moore and Alicia Vikander, depicting her at various points in her life. But amid all the shifting timelines, there was one constant that audiences couldn't look away from: Midler's bold, scene-stealing interpretation of Bella. She gave her the swagger, the grit, and the blazing energy that made Abzug unforgettable in real life. The film premiered at Sundance, earning quiet praise, and eventually landed on Amazon's streaming platform, where viewers and critics alike remarked on how effortlessly Midler brought a firebrand to life. But even with all the serious undertones of that role, Midler wasn't about to be boxed into a one type of character. By the year 2024, she was back to doing what she's always done best, making people laugh, feel, and cheer all in one breath. In The Fabulous Four, a sun-drenched comedy set in the colorful corners of Key West, she played Marilyn, a woman who catches her closest friends off guard by announcing she's getting married only a few months after her husband's death. It was the kind of role only Midler could fully own. Mischievous, emotional, and laced with surprise. But the story wasn't just about her. It was about long-lasting friendships, second chances, and the unexpected joys that come later in life. Sharing the screen with an incredible ensemble that included Susan Sarandon, Megan Mullally, and Cheryl Lee Ralph, she turned what could have been a lighthearted comedy into something much more meaningful. And then came a moment that sent longtime fans into a wave of nostalgia. Midler and Ralph performing I Can See Clearly Now together, a musical reunion that traced its roots back to their early days on Broadway during Ralph's Dreamgirls era. It wasn't just a film, it was a reminder that stories about older women, rich with history and humor, could still fill theaters and hearts just as much as any action blockbuster. And just as everyone was catching their breath from that surprise, Whispers started circling through the Broadway world. Could it really be happening? Was Midler coming back to the stage once more? The talk began with a few interviews, where she let slip that she had her eye on Mame, Jerry Herman's beloved musical centered around the wildly eccentric and fabulous Mame Dennis. She called the score fabulous, and while she admitted that the physicality of live theater at her age would be no small feat, she didn't rule it out. In fact, she hinted that she'd love to do it. And suddenly, the excitement was everywhere. Fans took to social media, flooded forums, and Broadway insiders began speculating what a Midler-led Mame revival might look like. After all, the last time she took on a leading role on stage, in the 2017 revival of Hello, Dolly, she delivered a phenomenon. That production broke records at the Shubert Theater and pulled in the largest advance ticket sales in Broadway history. Critics couldn't get enough of how she balanced over-the-top humor with surprising emotional depth, transforming a well-known character into something completely fresh. That's why Mame makes sense. It's a role that needs someone with personality, warmth, and the kind of unpredictable energy that can shift a quiet moment into theatrical brilliance. It needs someone who's fearless. And Midler is all that, and more. People are already imagining how she might tackle big musical numbers like We Need a Little Christmas or If He Walked Into My Life, and no one doubts she'd deliver something unforgettable once again. But as exciting as her possible return to the stage may be, it's important to remember just how much she's already accomplished. With over 30 million albums sold across the globe, she's more than just a theater legend. She's one of the most successful recording artists of her generation. Her music career, marked by 3 Grammy Awards, includes wins for Best New Artist in 1973, Best Female Pop Vocal Performance for The Rose in 1981, and Record of the Year for Wind Beneath My Wings in 1990. And that's only one chapter. In film, she earned 2 Academy Award nominations, one for her haunting role in The Rose and another for the Boys. Both performances also brought her Golden Globe wins. On television, she etched her name into history with 3 Primetime Emmy Awards, including the emotional farewell performance she gave on Johnny Carson's final Tonight Show. Her return to Broadway in Hello, Dolly earned her a Tony Award for Best Actress in a Musical, and she's also been honored with a Kennedy Center Award and the Songwriters Hall of Fame's Sammy Cahn Lifetime Achievement Award, recognizing her influence across multiple industries. Bette didn't inherit fame in any way. She built it herself, step by step, turning her influences, like Judy Garland and the Andrews Sisters, into stepping stones for her own original path. Today, artists like Adele and Lady Gaga cite her as an inspiration, not just for her voice or her showmanship, but for her fearlessness, her honesty, and her ability to mix vulnerability with spectacle. But Midler's legacy isn't limited to what happens on stage or on screen. She's used her platform to fight for causes she believes in, whether that means standing up for the environment, defending LGBTQ+ rights, or transforming abandoned city spaces into vibrant community gardens through her New York Restoration Project. To her, entertaining has never just been about applause. It's been about impact. And in every corner of her career, whether she's making you cry, laugh, or stand up and cheer, that's exactly what she's done. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.